All right, so studies. Stem cells reverse heart damage. On a June day in 2009, a 39-year-old man named Ken Mills lay on an exam table at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. That is a very famous medical center known widely throughout the world. That's my own commentary, not from the article, obviously. A month earlier, he'd suffered a massive heart attack that destroyed nearly a third of his heart. The most difficult part was the uncertainty, he recalls. Your heart is 30% damaged, and they tell you this could affect you for the rest of your life. He was about to receive an infusion of stem cells, grown from cells taken from his own heart only a few weeks earlier. No one had ever tried this before. Now, keep in mind, this article is from 2011, so it's a good introduction to stem cell therapy for heart disease. And I will put on more recent articles, but this is a good place to start to understand how this began, how the discovery of the fact that stem cells could rejuvenate and even perhaps cure heart disease was initially discovered. It's been used to reverse heart disease, and with more perfected methods, we have the opportunity to actually cure heart disease. And it's something that not that people aren't paying enough attention to, and we need a hashtag cure heart disease, and we need to raise funds for this. So that's one of the things I'm trying to do with this podcast. Regardless, so let's get back to the article. We're talking about a man who had just undergone a heart attack, and his heart was 30% damaged. About 3 weeks later in Kentucky, a patient named Mike Jones underwent a similar procedure at the University of Louisville's Jewish Hospital. Jones suffered from advanced heart failure, the result of a heart attack years earlier. Like Mills, he received an infusion of stem cells growing from his own heart tissue. Once you reach this stage of heart disease, you don't get better, says Dr. Robert Bali, who oversaw Jones' procedure, explaining what doctors have always believed and taught. It used to be that we would tell patients, you can go down slowly or go down quickly, but you're going to go down, in so, in so many words. But conventional wisdom took a hit Monday as Bali's group and a different team of researchers from Cedars-Sinai each reported in two separate studies that stem cell therapies were able to reverse heart damage without dangerous side effects, at least in small groups of patients. But we'll talk about third and fourth studies later. In Bali's study, published in the medical journal The Lancet, a peer-reviewed medical journal, 16 patients with severe heart failure received a purified batch of cardiac stem cells, also known as CSCs. So if you ever see the term CSC, it means cardiac stem cells. That means stem cells taken from the person's own heart. Within a year, their heart function markedly improved. The heart's pumping ability can be quantified through the left ventricle ejection fraction, a measure of how much blood the heart pumps with each contraction. A patient with an LVEF of less than 40% is considered to suffer severe heart failure. When the study began, patients had an average LVEF of 30.3%. A year later, it was 42.5%. So understand that 40% is a cutoff rate. Anything below 40 is considered severe heart failure. They went from 30.3% efficiency in their heart contractions to 42.5% efficiency with one infusion of stem cells. Now, what would happen if they received additional infusions of stem cells? Could they get even better? Well, that's something that contemporary studies are looking at doing, using further stem cell infusions to see even more improvement. So, and in addition, going back to the article, a control group of 7 patients given nothing but standard maintenance medications showed no improvement at all. So the control group showed no improvement at all. We were surprised by the magnitude of improvement, says Bali. if you don't know control, I'm not going to explain what a control group is. If you don't know what it is, look it up. We were surprised by the magnitude of improvement, says Dr. Bali, who says traditional therapies such as placing a stent to physically widen the patient's artery typically make a smaller difference. Prior to treatment, Mike Jones couldn't even walk to the restroom without stopping for breath, says Bali. Now he can drive a tractor on his farm. He can even play basketball with his grandchildren. His life was transformed. That's amazing. That's astounding. This should have been worldwide news. Every single news channel across the globe should have been reporting on this. We are on the way to curing heart disease, but it's not discussed nearly enough. Um, we are on the verge of curing heart disease. So at Cedars-Sinai, 17 patients, including Mills, were given stem cells approximately 6 weeks after suffering a moderate to major heart attack. All had lost enough tissue to put them at big risk of future heart failure, according to Dr. Eduardo Marvin, the director of the Cedars-Sinai Heart Institute, who developed the stem cell procedure used there. The results were striking in his study as well. Not only did scar tissue shrinking 40% in Ken Mills, and between 30 and 47%, almost 40%, 47% means almost half of the scar tissue shrank away. No, so not only did the scar tissue retreat from an average of 40%, the patients actually generated new heart tissue. On average, the stem cell recipients grew 600 million new heart cells, according to Marvin, who used MRI imaging to measure changes. This is unprecedented. The first time anyone has grown living heart muscle, says Marvin. No one else has demonstrated that. It's very gratifying, especially when the conventional teaching has always been that heart damage is irreversible. That is no longer true, but people don't know about this. That's why I'm starting this podcast. Perhaps even more important, no treated patient in either study suffered a significant health setback. The fact that the doctors who are working on stem cell therapy say that they're chronically underfunded is just a sin against humanity. We should be putting hundreds of billions of dollars into this, and not hundreds of billions of dollars into, okay, I'm not going to get into politics, into things that are completely worthless. And anyway, regardless, we need to help. People need to call their congressmen. They need to get involved and say, we need more funding. We need more state grants. We need more federal grants for research into stem cell therapy and its ability to reverse heart disease. Okay, so at the end of this article, I'll have a call to action regarding what you can do to help stem cell therapy get more funding by easily contacting your local representatives at the state and federal level. The link in the description. Perhaps even more important, no treated patient in either study suffered a significant health setback. The twin findings are a boost so two separate studies, okay? Dr. Robert Bali in Kentucky, and then at Cedars-Sinai with Dr. Marvin. They both did the studies at about the same time. The results came out, one came out 1 week, and the other came out 4 weeks later. So these studies were going on. These two separate studies were going on simultaneously. So both studies both studies arrived at similar results. Okay, so for years, doctors believed that heart cells, once destroyed, were gone forever, and there was no way to change that. But in a series of experiments, researchers, including Dr. Bali's collaborator, Dr. Piero Anversa is Dr. Bali's collaborator, found that the heart contains a type of stem cell that can develop into either heart muscle or blood vessel components. In essence, whatever the heart requires at a particular point in time. The problem for patients like Mike Jones or Ken Mills is that there are simply not enough stem cells waiting around. The experimental treatment, however, involved removing the stem cells through a biopsy and then making hundreds of millions of copies in a laboratory. That's called cultivating the stem cells. It usually takes 8 to 12 weeks. The Bali/Anversa group, because they're collaborators, and Marvin's team, who did the separate study at Cedars-Sinai, both used cardiac stem cells. But Bali and Versa, quote unquote, purified the cardiac stem cells so that more than 9% of the infusion was pure stem cells. Marvin, on the other hand, did not purify his stem cells, but instead used a mixture of stem cells and other types of cells he extracted from the patient's heart. We found that the mixture, rather than the purified cardiac stem cells, is more potent than any subtype we've been able to isolate, he says. He says the additional cells may help by providing a supportive environment for the stem cells to multiply. So you don't want to purify the stem cells, according to Dr. Marvin. You want to take, you want to include the non-stem cells taken from the heart and infuse them back in the body because they'll help create a supportive environment for the stem cells to um, multiply. Well, and be to multiply either in the lab or in the body. It doesn't say. He said the additional cells may help by providing a supportive environment for the stem cells to multiply. Well, they do that in the lab. I wonder after the injection if the stem cells multiply as well. Is there further multiplication once they're injected back to the patient? I would assume not. I assume he's talking about multiplying the stem cells within the laboratory. Other scientists, including Dr. Douglas Lizardo, have produced improvements in cardiac patients. I have to slow down. Other scientists, including Dr. Douglas Lizardo, have produced improvements in cardiac patients using stem cells derived from bone marrow. The body contains cells that seem to be pre-programmed for repair, explains Lizardo. The consistent thing about all these approaches is that they're leveraging what seems to be the body's own repair mechanism. Lizardo praised the Lancet paper and recalls the skepticism that met in Versa's initial claims a decade ago that there were stem cells in the adult heart. Some scientists are always resistant to that type of novelty. You know the saying, first they ignore you, then they attack you, and finally they imitate you. Dennis Buxton, who oversees stem cell research at the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute at the National Institutes of Health, calls the studies a paradigm shift, harnessing the heart's own regenerative processes. But he says he would like to see more head-to-head comparisons to determine which type of cells are most beneficial. To determine which type of cells are most beneficial. So you have the cardiac stem cells that Dr. Bali used that were purified. Marvin didn't purify the stem cells because he believes the other non-stem cells provide a beneficial environment for the stem cells to grow and multiply and be healthy. And then you have Dr. Lizardo, who uses stem cells from bone marrow for heart disease, and has also saw very, very, very promising results. So the stem cells don't necessarily need to come from the heart because some stem cells can turn to any other type of cell. But it may be the fact that the cardiac stem cells may be more effective than the bone marrow stem cells at becoming heart and um, heart tissue cells and artery cells. The cardiac stem cells might be superior, um, but we don't know yet. We might. I have to look at the current literature. This again is from 10 years ago, 2011. Questions also remain about timing. Patients who suffer large heart attacks are prone to future damage, in part because the weakened heart tries to compensate by dilating, swelling, and by changing shape. That's cardiac myopathy. In a vicious cycle, the changes make the heart a less efficient pump, which leads to more overcompensation, and so on, until the end result is heart failure. Marvin's study aimed to treat patients before they could develop heart failure in the first place. In the third study released Monday, researchers treated patients with severe heart failure with stem cells derived from bone marrow. In a group of 60 patients, those receiving this treatment had fewer heart problems over the course of a year, as well as improved heart function. So in a third study released Monday, a group of 60 patients who received the treatment had fewer heart problems over the course of a year, as well as improved heart function. And now a fourth study also used stem cells derived from bone marrow, but injected them into patients 2 to 3 weeks after a heart attack. Previous studies with the previous studies where the cells were given just days after a heart attack found a modest improvement in heart function. But Monday, the lead researcher, Dr. Dan Simon of UHK's Medical Center, reported that with the 3 week delay, patients did not seem this reported that with the 3 week delay, patients did not see the same benefit. Um, well, that is his claim, but you know we have to see if that's actually the case. Is it best to get a stem cell therapy right after a heart attack, and is it the sooner the better, or does it not matter if it's been a year after a heart attack, 3 months after a heart attack, 4 weeks after a heart attack, or minutes after a heart attack, hours after a heart attack? How does the time window after a heart attack affect the um, the results of the stem cell therapy? It would seem that Dr. Simon believes that the sooner you can provide the stem cell therapy to victims of a heart attack, the sooner you can grow up, the more effectively you'll be able to replace the damaged heart cells within the body. So in the future, when a patient comes in with a heart attack, in the ER, you would most likely give them stem cell therapy in order to help minimize the damage from the heart attack and perhaps also prevent any further damage from the heart attack. So that would be interesting to see. Uh, Stem cells being used in critical care as well as in not walking clinics, but regular clinics. With other methods, there may be a larger window of opportunity time-wise. At least in initial studies, Lizardo's bone marrow treatments helped some patients with long-standing heart problems. Bali's Lancet paper suggests that CSCs, too, might help patients with advanced disease. These patients had heart failure for several years. They were a wreck, says Bali, but we found their stem cells were still very competent. But by that, he means the cells were still capable of multiplying and of turning into useful muscle and blood vessel walls. I would say blood vessel um, tissue, but suppose that works, into useful blood and blood vessel walls. Marvin has an open mind on the timing issue. In fact, one patient from his control group emailed after the study was complete, saying he felt terrible and pleading for an infusion of stem cells. Okay, so a patient who was in the control group who did not receive the stem cells emailed Marvin pleading to get the stem cells because he was in terrible shape and he heard about how well the patients who actually received the treatment were doing. At Marvin's request, the FDA granted special approval to treat him. He had a very nice response. That was 14 months after his heart attack. Of course, that's just one person, and we need bigger studies. Okay, so 14 months after a heart attack, this um, specific gentleman saw marked improvement, even after 14 months after his heart attack. So the timing issue is still up to debate. For Ken Mills, the procedure itself wasn't painful, but it was unsettling. The biopsy to harvest the cells felt "quote unquote" weird, as he recalls how he felt the doctor poking around inside his heart. The infusion a weeks later was harder. The procedure, basically the same as an angioplasty, involved stopping blood flow through the damaged artery for 3 minutes while the stem cells were infused. It felt exactly like I was having a heart attack again, Mills remembers. Mills had spent the first weeks after his heart attack just lying in bed, rewatching his old Sopranos DVDs. But within a week of receiving the stem cell infusion, he says, I was reinvigorated. Reinvigorated. Today he's back at work full time as an accounting manager at a construction company. He's cut out fast food and shed 50 pounds. His wife and teenage sons are thrilled. So he went from not being able to even work and just having to lie in bed and watch The Sopranos to being able to work full time again. And he cut out fast food, shed 50 pounds. And this guy who might have died within the next year has his life back thanks to the stem cell therapy. Dennis Buxton says the papers could prove a milestone. We don't have anything else to actually regenerate the heart. These stem cell therapies have the possibility of actually reversing damage. Bali says he'll have to temper his enthusiasm until he can duplicate the results in larger studies with more patients. Definitive enough to get stem cell therapy approved as a standard treatment by the FDA. If a phase 3 study confirmed this, it would be the biggest advance in cardiology in my lifetime. We would possibly be curing heart failure. It would be a revolution in medical science. All right, so that is the article. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you're interested in this sort of content. I talk about biohacking, heart disease, how to utilize the best supplements and dietary changes to have the best amounts of energy, the best mood possible, um, the the minimum amount of stress possible, and the maximum amount of gratitude, happiness, and joy in life, as well as reporting on how stem cell therapy can be used to reverse heart disease, and also talk about other regenerative medical treatments for heart disease that work very well and are only known by functional and integrative medical doctors. If you want to really if you have heart disease and you really want to get it treated properly, see a functional or integrative medical doctor. Go into Google and search for functional medical doctors near me, and then look for integrative medical doctors near me. And then, do some calls and find uh, at least one doctor and try them out. I usually like to get two different opinions. So if I'm going to any doctor with test results, for him to look over the test results from all my various blood tests and cardiovascular tests, I like to go to two different doctors to see if their opinions regarding my situation are the same, and see where they disagree, where their analyses differ. Because I always like to hear a second opinion, but that's just me.